Okay, um, you're not going to see this video listed in this view because obviously I am making this video. I will add it in under the instructions once everything's done and I've got it uploaded. So this is just a quick overview of Programming Assignment 2. Please, I'm not answering all questions in the universe here. Please don't expect it. Please go back to the video demonstrations and review those as well. Okay. So we're going to start by looking quickly at the instructions. As always, the table of contents just partly to assure you that everything's there and partly to tell you it's really only 2 pages long. Don't freak out yet. So here are all the things that are provided to you. UML class diagrams. The test harness here is complete. It's actually not a shell. I should have removed that word. The test harness here is technically complete. We'll get to the technically piece in a minute. There is an executable for the standards check. This one goes just a tiny little bit deeper than the PA1 check. You want to make sure you're still following all of those basic coding standards, okay? Sample output, grading rubric, basic stuff. Your policy class has changed slightly. What you're going to want to do, and this part is important, please pay attention to this piece. Create a new folder. Copy your policy.java code from your PA1 folder into the new folder. Don't muck with your existing working code, please. Okay, I'm really paranoid about that. I never mess with code that works. I always start with a fresh folder and a copy of the code that works so that I don't mess anything up too horribly. There's some minor changes in your policy class description. Refer to the UML, pay close attention to them. The one I'm going to talk about is the removal of the instance variable type. Because we are now going to have 2 subclasses called renters and homeowners, we don't need that type variable in policy anymore. The subclass is going to define the type. Here's a thought. This makes our lives easier. This is what super and subclass relationships are all about. You start with something very general and you get more specific as you move down the hierarchy. Okay, so pay close attention to the UML changes in policy. They are flagged, they're green, they're highlighted in green so you can find them relatively easily. You will, in that brand new folder where you copied over PA1's policy and started making mods, you're going to build renters and homeowners. You will place that PA2 standards check executable in that new folder. You will put a copy of test policy hierarchy.java in that new folder, okay? Go back to the UML on policy, take a look at that. We're removing the instance variable type. That means that there's some other code that's no longer going to be used. There are a couple of methods, or 3, that are no longer going to be used. Please delete that code. That code will be, quote, dead, unquote. Hard to do air quotes when I don't have a camera. That code will be dead. Remove dead code. Never leave dead code lying around. I have a really bad sort of way of expressing that. I won't go into that. Anyway, I come from a hunting family. We'll leave it there. Build renters according to the UML, build homeowners according to the UML. These are both subclasses of policy. That means you need to recognize how to identify a subclass. You need to recognize that there's something interesting that has to go on in those constructors. You need to recognize relationship between sets and gets in your subclass and those in your superclass. You need to recognize that there should be a relationship between the toString method in your subclass and that in your superclass. Again, please go back to the video demos. I go through all of those details in the video demos. Okay. Test policy hierarchy is technically complete. You don't technically have to add anything. I strongly recommend that you do add a couple of test cases. The actual truth, and I have never found this to be a false thing ever, and we won't talk about how many years experience, but more than a couple. You can't over-test code. Until you run up to, I've got to package this from move to the next level, you can still test code. There's no such thing as ever testing code. Test it, test it, test it some more, and then test it again. I've seen some really unpleasant things happen when well, I thought so-and-so tested that. No, they didn't. Well, that's just a weird circumstance. How did that happen? Well, I don't care. It did. And now the code's blown up. Test your code. There's no such thing as over-testing your code. So I strongly recommend that you add a couple of test cases just because, and because it'll make your life easier for PA3. We'll get to that later. The standards check is a minimal standards check. You are responsible for doing a full standards check on your own code. The video demos for basic standards are always there. The demos for superclass, subclass relationship, inheritance, and polymorphism are all written to the basic standards. So please, make sure you've tested your code. All I want when you submit these 3 pieces, I've given you all the rest of it, I don't need it back. Thank you. I've had a couple of students ask that. Do we include the standards check? Do we include the test? No, please don't. I gave you that to start with, so I don't really need it back. I'll be using my own originals for those, so don't worry about that. Okay. The UML class diagrams real quick. Oh, look, green. Things that have changed. I didn't do the constructor and probably should have, but the notes down here also cover that. Please take note of some things that have changed. Policy is now abstract. Okay. Please note there's some stuff going on here. This has got to do with abstract classes and defining methods in superclass, subclass relationships with an abstract superclass. That really shouldn't say skeleton. That's the full test harness. I'm not going to bother opening that right now. Here is your executable. Again, put all of this in a new folder. Please, a new folder. Please, please, a new folder. It will make your life easier. Based on the test cases I've provided, okay, this is what you should see when you execute and everything works. Now, on the test cases, I know some instructors, not so much me, but I know some instructors get really picky about things like spacing. I'm not going to get really, really picky about that, okay, because someday in the future, your users and or management will beat you up over spacing. They will pound into you whatever the corporate or unit or division or group preferences, standards for spacing are. I'm not going to worry too much about that. What I do worry about, I want the data in the right order. This is a name. This describes the type of object. Here's a policy number. Here's the group issuing it. Here's the premium amount. Pretty formatting. You don't have to do anything fancy for this. Seriously, you did this in 2033. Nothing too fancy to do to get this, but I do require that currency be currency formatted. I come from a financial services background, and oh my gosh, do you know what CPAs do if you don't do currency formatting? They get very distressed. Okay, so the point here is these data items must be in this order. If you add a space or remove a space, I'm good. If you forget the comma, I won't have a fit over that, okay? The data items must be in the correct order. All currency values must be formatted, and you got to do the calculations right. Calculation formulas are in your UML. Grading rubric is relatively straightforward. This is actually shorter than PA1's. I want to be sure you did all 3 of those classes correctly. And yes, I want to see comments, I want to see well-organized code, and I want to know that you met all the rest of the standards. So you can actually use this as kind of a checklist along with the UML and the instructions to help you walk through that. And oh yeah, here's a link to those coding standards again, just in case. The documents and all of the videos. So hopefully that will fill in any blanks. One thing I do also want to note, if you email me or otherwise contact me with questions that could be answered by going back to the standards or watching these videos or the superclass subclass videos, I will ask you first whether you've watched those. Okay? I want you guys to go to the resources you've got first. That's really important in this course. It's not something you're going to be graded on per se, but it is important to me that you get used to doing that, because as a professional, this is what's going to be expected of you. So let's start building those good habits now so that we have them in our toolbox when we are ready to go out for those job interviews. Okay, thank you for watching the video, and I hope this helped some. And wash your hands, be careful, stay safe. Thank you.